Taliban gain confidence, extend reach in Afghanistan. Iran's new president, what the world can expect from Al-Brahim regime. Good evening, viewers. Welcome back to TV Education Timor in the Voice of America News. With me, Dirce Lilifania, to deliver the latest news, sharp and reliable with the best reporter from different countries from all around the world, which we summarize in TV Education Timor. The VOA and TV Education Timor work together to deliver Voice of America News in Timor-Leste, especially through the TV Education Timor channel. Well, let's begin the news for today. The United States troop withdrawal from Afghanistan is more than halfway finished, yet the country is plagued with the violence as the Taliban extend their reach.
Gunfire heard in the distance as the Taliban take control in Afghanistan's northern Kunduz province near the border of Tajikistan.
The situation in Kunduz is very bad. It is insecure. There are so many wounded victims in the hospital.
The Taliban advances as U.S. troops leave with the firm deadline of September. So far, the insurgents have overrun 60 districts. That was the topic in Tuesday's United Nations Security Council debate.
Most districts that have been taken surround provincial capitals, suggesting that the Taliban are positioning themselves to try and take these capitals once foreign forces are fully withdrawn.
In this exclusive interview with VOA, Afghanistan First Vice President Amrullah Saleh says the Taliban have gained confidence in the absence of U.S. forces.
Well, they have this fake conviction that they have defeated the foreigners, and it's a matter of defeating the Afghan forces.
So the hurdle for the U.S. is getting the Taliban to the peace table. That will be on the agenda when President Joe Biden meets Friday with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani and the High Council for National Reconciliation Chairman Abdullah Abdullah. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says they will discuss
how we can work together to ensure that Afghanistan never again becomes a safe haven for terrorist groups who pose a threat to the U.S. homeland, how we can work together to continue to implement the humanitarian assistance, other assistance.
Former U.S. Ambassador to Afghanistan Ronald Newman says Friday's meeting is symbolic, but also more than that.
It is important that both Dr. Abdullah and President Ghani are coming together. I think this is a very important and visible sign of unity that is very much needed in Kabul.
The U.S. is providing more than $266 million in new humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan as it exits its longest war in U.S. history. According to the UN, 18 million Afghanis are in need, and nearly 5 million are internally displaced. Carolyn Persuti, VOA News at the White House.
The United States will not reach President Joe Biden's goal of partially or fully vaccinating 70% of adults by the July 4th Independence Day holiday.
In the U.S., COVID-19 case numbers are down to the lowest levels since March 2020. But those encouraging numbers are coming as the White House announces it will not reach an early July goal of vaccinating 70% of all American adults. One problem, younger Americans.
The country has more work to do, is particularly with 18 to 26-year-olds. The reality is many younger Americans have felt like COVID-19 is not something that impacts them, and they've been less eager to get the shot.
The White House has announced Tuesday that 70% of Americans over age 30 have been partially or fully vaccinated. And while the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says vaccination rates have increased in communities of color in recent weeks, U.S. lawmakers say more work needs to be done.
We will not reach the goals in many states and communities if we do not continue to address the hesitancy, misinformation, and other issues holding back Americans from getting vaccinated. We have to continue increasing access and addressing barriers which make it hard for people to get vaccines. especially for people of color.
And with nearly half of American evangelical Christians saying they will not take the vaccine, one theologian told lawmakers that hesitancy has a worldwide impact.
And at the global level, American evangelical culture is highly influential in parts of Asia and Africa. We're already exporting our misinformation and fears to the rest of the world, especially via social media.
Even with 20 to 30% of American adults unvaccinated, U.S. officials are optimistic there will not be a fourth surge of the coronavirus in the U.S. this winter.
I don't think even under those circumstances that you're going to see things like 1,000 deaths a day. I think that is a bit much. But there is a danger, a real danger, that if there is a persistence of a recalcitrance to getting vaccinated, that you could see localized surges.
And as the U.S. was working to raise its own vaccination rates, the White House said earlier this week that its goal of sharing 80 million vaccine doses globally by the end of June is being complicated by logistical challenges. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan is calling for reconciliation after winning a snap election held in a bid to unite the nation, deeply polarized in the wake of its defeat in a recent conflict with Azerbaijan.
With 54% of the vote going to his party, Armenians handed Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan a comfortable victory in parliamentary elections, defeating former President Robert Kacharian. International observers rate these elections as free and fair, but they note the strongly polarized atmosphere of the entire process.
Elections in the Republic of Armenia were competitive and generally well managed with a short time frame. However, they were characterized by intense polarization and marred by increasingly inflammatory rhetoric among key contestants.
The top two candidates ran populist campaigns charged with personal attacks and insults, observers say. The reason for the tension is the defeat of Armenian forces last year in the Nagorno-Karabakh enclave of Azerbaijan, where Armenians had sought to retain control. The small parts that Armenia still controls are now under the de facto command of the Russian army, deployed in what Moscow calls a peace mission, a situation that analysts say is far from being resolved.
This border is in constant danger of exploding, as is the border between Abkhazia and Georgia, where the line of contact is not defined.
Pashinyan supporters are celebrating an unexpectedly wide victory, but the country faces many challenges, not just territorial. Armenia remains mired in an economic and institutional crisis.
This election victory is not enough to resolve deeper deficiencies and underlying problems in governance. In other words, democracy requires institutional checks and balances.
The Prime Minister has difficult years ahead, in which the military defeat and huge personal losses are going to be a difficult legacy to handle. For Pablo Gonzalez in Yerevan and Ricardo Marquina in Moscow, John Spear, VOA News.
Europe's surging far right has suffered setback recently in Germany's eastern state of Saxony.
Far-right leader Marine Le Pen hoped to be celebrating this week. Polls gave her national rally a shot at controlling at least one of France's 13 regions for the first time. Some considered this election a preview of next year's presidentials, which may again pit Le Pen against incumbent Emmanuel Macron. But Sunday's results disappointed both politicians. Macron's centrist party fared poorly, and only in France's southern Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur region is the far-right's candidate, Thierry Mariani, ahead.
His, Mariani's, challenge will be the second round. Abstention may be high, and it will depend on voter turnout for his rivals. It remains complicated for National Rally to win against the mainstream right candidate.
Here in eastern Bourgogne-Franche-Comté region, the National Rally's regional party head, Julien Audoul, trails a few points behind socialist frontrunner and incumbent Marguerite Dufay. With a record two-thirds abstention countrywide, Odoul is urging supporters to vote in next Sunday's runoff. Staying home, he says, amounts to a vote for Macron. Odoul is running in a region that's a key industrial hub, but also largely rural, known for its wine, cows, and cheese.
I think most French realize that Marine Le Pen and the National Rally were right on every subject before the others. We were right about immigration, insecurity, Islamism, and on the local level, on divisions and lack of medical services. Today, everything we predicted has come to fruition.
Odoul's rivals claim the National Rally is misleading voters, campaigning on crime and immigration that aren't under regional control.
They're running on this theme because we've faced hard times economically here in Montbéliard. Peugeot had 42,000 workers 40 years ago. Now the factory will have just about 5,000.
Odoul is controversial for other reasons. In 2019, he ordered a Muslim woman to remove her veil at a regional council meeting. More recent reports, which he denies, suggest he mocked farmer suicides.
I don't agree with the National Rally. I won't be voting for them.
How the National Rally fares in the regional runoffs June 27th will be closely watched, but it may not necessarily offer lessons for higher stakes national elections next year. Lisa Bryant for VOA News, Montbéliard, France.
Iran's newly elected president has reiterated support from the 2015 nuclear deal and promised to establish relations with Arab neighbors in the Gulf region. Henry Richel for VOA News.
Iran's president-elect Ebrahim Raisi is a regime loyalist and a long-standing critic of the West. He was active in Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution and rose to the top of the judiciary. But the office of president will not reward him with real political power, says analyst Alex Vatanka.
Will he be able to shift course, take the country in a different direction? Absolutely not. He just doesn't have that power.
Instead, that power resides with Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Khamenei, through his protege Raisi, has expressed support for resurrecting the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, known as the JCPOA. Former US President Donald Trump withdrew from the accord in 2018. Accord critics say Washington should be wary of rejoining.
I think Khamenei is comfortable now dispensing with the fig leaf of moderation, dispensing with the mask, and does not even appear content to make cosmetic changes to the Islamic Republic because he knows U.S. interest in resurrecting the JCPOA is so high.
Nuclear talks in Vienna between Iran and 6 world powers were adjourned Sunday. Raisi will likely appoint a new team of negotiators, but there won't be major changes to Iran's foreign policy, says Vatanka.
The Iranians are not going to pack up and leave Vienna just because he's president-elect. He has mentioned China, that he's very keen on continuing the 25-year strategic deal, which was signed back in March with the Chinese. Whatever that means, we'll wait and see.
Raisi has said he will seek to stabilize relations with Arab rivals in the region.
Maybe Riyadh and Abu Dhabi and others in the Arab world will take Raisi a little bit more seriously because they think he's a front man for Ayatollah Khamenei.
Rights groups say Raisi was one of 4 judges who oversaw executions of thousands of political prisoners in 1988. He remains under US sanctions.
Engaging with a regime that has someone who oversaw mass executions in Tehran in the late 1980s is not going to be the most wise course of action for Washington.
Ultimately, it will be the Iranian people who will mobilize to determine the country's future, says French-Iranian analyst Manaz Shirali.
I think we are not far from seeing demonstrations. I think that Iranian society is pregnant with deep movements within itself. So I think that following this election, we can expect to find a people who have gained confidence in their ability to act, to not put up with so much injustice.
But under President Raisi, analysts predict the Iranian regime will continue to crush any sign of political dissent. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
After the shot-in death of Breonna Taylor in 2020, her sister Junia Palmer not only had to deal with her loss, but also with attacks and death threats on social media.
Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old African-American medical technician, was killed in her home in Louisville, Kentucky in March 2020 by police officers conducting an investigation into drug dealing. When police forced their way into Taylor's apartment, her boyfriend fired a warning shot because he later said he thought the police were intruders. Police returned fire and Breonna Taylor was killed. Her death fueled nationwide protest against police brutality and calls for police reform. More than a year later, Breonna's sister, Junia Palmer, says she not only has to deal with her loss, but also attacks and death threats on social media.
So they would say things like, it's your sister's boyfriend's fault she's dead, your sister shouldn't be a drug dealer. It just varied.
When Lady Phoenix, a digital artist from California, learned about the harassment, she had an idea of how to help. In collaboration with the virtual reality artist Sutu, aka Stuart Campbell, she created an augmented reality project called Breonna's Garden, a safe virtual space for Breonna's family to share their memories and go through the grieving process.
Both of them are in the garden, and we're going to volumetrically capture Junia and place her in the garden next to Breonna. At a future timeline, they will both be in the garden in more real ways, but Breonna is a 3D character, I don't even want to say character, but she's a 3D representation of herself. And Junia is a holographic representation of herself placed side by side.
To take part in the project, Junia flew to California from Kentucky to create her personal hologram at MetaStage Studio.
A memory that I have of me and Breonna is it was winter of '09 and we had a really bad winter ice storm. My mom was at work and it was just me and Breonna in the house, and it was really, really cold, and I remember Breonna being scared, so we stood in front of our window. Well, not stood. We sat in front of our window and we coated up with blankets just to wait until Mom gets home.
Breonna's Garden will be accessible from anywhere in the world via an app called iJack. Once you're there, you can walk around the garden like it's a real physical space.
People will be able to walk around in a real garden, and then from the real garden these artificial flowers will also start growing.
In the garden, visitors will not only be able to hear Breonna's story told by her loved ones, but also record a voice message supporting her family or addressing their own loved ones who have passed away. The recordings will then turn into flowers that anyone can click on and listen to.
Breonna has become this enormous figure now and has come to represent like a political movement. But before that, she was this girl's sister. And I think this brings us all down to earth as to what it actually feels like just to lose your sister, your best friend.
The premiere of the project is taking place at the Tribeca Festival in New York City that opened on June 9th and continues to June 20th. Jenia Dulo for VOA News, Los Angeles, California.
TV Education Timor viewers, this information at the same time concluding our meeting for today's section. For more information, please call us on number below. I'm Derseli Lifania on behalf of the crew on Dati. Step back from your face, have a good night and see you next time.